It hardly restores Russia's international position to be backed by the likes of the DPRK, Syria, and Belarus. In September, the United States suggested that Russia was looking to secure artillery and rockets from the DPRK. It later suggested that it had intelligence that the DPRK was looking to supply that, but to obfuscate the supply route. And as you say, there's now a suggestion that the DPRK might be supplying more advanced systems. I think there's no evidence that I've seen from the battlefield of these supply contracts, but of course it may be happening, and we just haven't seen the external evidence yet.
And what kind of things could Russia potentially be seeking to purchase from North Korea?
Well, in the past, the DPRK in North Korea, which is under an arms embargo, so should not be supplying any weapons, has illicitly supplied to other markets anything from small arms and light weapons up to ballistic missiles. I think that the initial report suggesting that Russia was looking to replenish ammunition supplies and obtain rockets certainly suggested that Russia was looking to acquire armaments, munitions from the DPRK that the DPRK is well capable of supplying. The DPRK has demonstrated that it has more advanced systems than that, but I have no information on what else Russia might be looking for from the DPRK. Of course, there is evidence from the battlefield of the acquisition of drones from Iran, which gives an indication of some of the areas where Russia may be looking for additional equipment, munitions.
Interesting. And what has DPRK's general position and feeling towards the Ukraine war been?
It has throughout indicated support for Russia. It's one of a very small number of countries that in the United Nations has voted with Russia against motions condemning the illegal invasion. It's also recognized initially the breakaway territories, Donetsk and Luhansk, and then it recognized the referenda, the illegal referenda, incorporating those territories into Russia. So it has gone out of its way, really, to show its support for Russia in the war with Ukraine.
But given it's such a pariah state, how useful is it to Russia to have the diplomatic support of North Korea?
I think the motivation of the DPRK in being useful to Russia is to get Russia's support for the DPRK. I think that it hardly restores Russia's international position to be backed by the likes of the DPRK, Syria, and Belarus. So I think it is of quite limited utility to Russia. But for the DPRK, having the support of Russia is, I think, very important for its own wish to develop its ballistic and nuclear missile program. And the fact that Russia with China have been working together in the Security Council to prevent new sanctions resolutions against the DPRK, as the DPRK has launched more missiles of many different kinds, is an indication of that.
Mm-hmm. And what do we know about the personal relationship between Kim Jong Un and Vladimir Putin?
I think we don't know a great deal about it. We do know that up until 2018, the DPRK had very, very limited top-level interaction with anybody under Kim Jong Un. And then we had the change in 2018 where North Korea, first of all, took part in the Winter Olympics in the Republic of Korea, and Kim Jong Un had meetings with Moon Jae-in, the Republic of Korea president at the time, and then went on from there to meetings with Xi Jinping and, of course, with Donald Trump. And it wasn't until after the failure of the Hanoi summit in 2019, the summit with Donald Trump, that Kim Jong Un met Vladimir Putin, and the reports of that meeting were made available to some extent by the Russians. It wasn't clear at the time, I think, quite what a switch the DPRK was making. Kim Jong Un at the time asked the Russians to relay his position to the United States, and the Russians did that and said that they would do so also to China. But I think since then it's clear that Kim Jong Un has decided that there is no prospect of progress with the United States and has sought to take advantage of relations with Russia and with China. And whatever the nature of his personal relationship with Putin, he's very clear in his statements about seeking to align with Russia and with China.
And what wider effect is the war in Ukraine having on the East Asia region?
Well, of course, this has been a year with many developments in it, of which the war in Ukraine is a major development, but not the only one affecting peace and security in the Asian region. I mean, in terms of the reaction to the war, I mean, we have seen different modulations of the reaction from different Asian countries. Obviously, you've seen the position of China, where having agreed an unlimited partnership with Russia, Xi Jinping and China have supported the war in Ukraine in the sense of their rhetoric, but not in the sense of supplying armaments to Russia for use in the war. Only the DPRK has really come all out from the region in its support for Russia. You've seen countries like India not necessarily sanctioning Russia, indeed not sanctioning Russia, and continuing to trade with Russia to procure petroleum, for instance, but also with Modi criticizing Putin, in some terms at least, for acting against the spirit of the age, which in Modi's words should be as not war in this age. And then you've obviously seen Singapore joining with the Republic of Korea, Japan, the United States, Australia, and others, including Western Europe, in sanctioning Russia. Japan faced not just with the concerns about the war in Ukraine and its implications in terms of oil prices, fuel prices, food supply, but also seeing really a concern about what can happen if countries invade, and the materialization, if you like, of the fact that war is a reality. An analogy which it applies really to when looking at the Taiwan Straits and China. But Japan also, with Russia as a neighbour, so concerned about the implications of Russian behaviour should it be reproduced on Japan's borders, and of course facing the DPRK as a neighbour with North Korean missile launches, of over 60 missile launches this year of different ranges, including one shot over the islands, shot over Japan, is at present going through a change to its security stance of a major kind. I mean, it has got a new defence strategy, a new security strategy, looking at a budget increase for its defence, taking it up to around 2% of the national budget of GDP. These are major changes and are linked with changes in the meaning of defence for Japan and what Japan can do in terms of defence. Now, you can't put that all down to the war in Ukraine, but the war in Ukraine is a very considerable factor in that.
Alastair, you mentioned there that the DPRK is pursuing nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missiles. How worried should we be with the progress that they've made?
I think that the progress that the DPRK has demonstrated over this year is reason for concern. Of course, it comes on the back of the progress that the DPRK made, particularly in its launches and its nuclear tests in 2016 and 2017. But I think this year they have really demonstrated a range of missiles of different range. So the short-range ballistic missiles, medium-range, intermediate range, and intercontinental ballistic missiles. I lose count of how many launches there have been, but there have been perhaps 8 launches or tests linked to ICBMs this year, intercontinental ballistic missiles, including different systems. And as well as those ranges for the missiles, we've seen the development in some of the missiles of solid fuel models, so they can be launched much more quickly than liquid fuel models. We've seen the DPRK demonstrating manoeuvrable re-entry vehicles with its launches. We've had a complete change to, or a new announcement of the DPRK's nuclear doctrine, and I think you need to look not just at the capability of the missiles, but the intent, and that doctrine is a cause for concern. So in terms of systems that are probably more accurate, harder to detect, harder to prevent, there are good reasons for being concerned.
And it also comes off the back of North Korea trying to put a spy satellite into orbit. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, one of the things that Kim Jong Un did in January last year was set out various targets for the continuing development of the missile program and nuclear weapons. And in that context, he said that one of the objectives was to put into space a military satellite really focused on neighbouring countries. The missile tests that were conducted just a couple of days ago were accompanied by text which stated that this was preparation for such a satellite launch, and they were accompanied by images which were purportedly taken from those missile firings. And the DPRK has said that it will complete the satellite development by April of next year. This is not the first time that the DPRK has worked on satellite launches. It has claimed in the past successfully to have launched satellites, though not it said military observation satellites, but no signals from those satellites have been found. So it's not a foregone conclusion that the fact that the DPRK is working on a military observation satellite would mean that it will successfully launch a military observation satellite. But I think there's no reason to doubt the intention. And it keeps working, the DPRK keeps working as well on its Sohae missile rocket launch test site. So there are signs there, indications there that it's preparing for a launch at some point, though that test site is used for other things as well, including engine tests.
Well, we will have to wait and see. Just finally, I wanted to ask you, you are one of the UK's foremost experts on the deeply secretive state of North Korea. Is there any prospect of the country undergoing significant reform or opening up? And what are the circumstances in which that could happen?
Like most people, even people who, as I've done, have lived in the DPRK, I hesitate to use the term expert, but it's certainly true that I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about the DPRK, reading about the DPRK and finding out what information I can. I'm sorry to be less than optimistic about the prospects at the moment for the DPRK opening up and reforming. I think that at some point the DPRK would look to lift its own self-imposed barrier, which it put down in January 2020 because of COVID. But with COVID spreading fast at the moment in China, there's no reason to assume that the DPRK will do that quickly. It will remain cautious. There's been a little limited re-engagement of cross-border trade with China and with Russia. Over this last year, the signs are that really partly in response to its own border closure, but also in response to sanctions, the DPRK has in fact tightened its hold over the economy and economic activity within the country. And while in 2018 there were some signs at the Singapore summit that Kim Jong Un was looking outwards and was ready to embrace some forms of international trade and development and relationships, at the moment I think there's none of that. And there is absolutely nothing that the DPRK is putting out that suggests that it's going to be ready to take up the repeated offer from the United States to engage in dialogue without conditions. Of course, the objective of that for the United States and its allies and partners is to achieve complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, of the DPRK. But the DPRK is simply not responding, has said that it will not forego its nuclear weapons, and I'm afraid at the moment there's no sign of change. But change, can come. When I was in the DPRK in 2017, it was not completely obvious that there would be a change in approach in 2018, and the reaching out to the Republic of Korea, China, and the United States. There were some hints, but it wasn't completely clear. So never say never, but I'm not holding my breath.
Well, thank you, Alastair Morgan. That's all we have time for today, but we really appreciate your insights. Thanks for joining Times Radio, and thanks also to producer Louis Sykes.